What was your first connection to the fire service, or what's your first like interaction with the fire service that you remember?
Huh. Well, there's a saying that every young boy wants to become a firefighter in the future. And well, it never happened to me. I never thought about becoming a firefighter until I was in the last year of my secondary school. And I had a good,
What's secondary school?
it's like after primary school, 8 classes.
Yeah.
You can choose like a general school or technical school. I went to technical school. I learned about electronics, energy, and all that stuff, electricity, current.
Yeah.
So I had a profile school, and in the last year, before the exams, final exams from the school, my good friend approached me and said that he would like to attempt to apply to a fire college in Poland. And the question from him was whether I would like to try with him.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I didn't have an idea for my future occupation at that time. And I said, yeah, why not? I gave it a couple thoughts. Then I said, okay, it's a good job. It's a stable job. It's a job that gives you an opportunity to help other people. So I liked the idea and I stuck with it. And funny enough, my colleague resigned and I went for it. And then I applied to the fire academy. I passed the exams, and so it began. So it was in 1999. I was 20 years old at that time.
So when you applied to the college, that was so you applied to fire college, and then if you are accepted into fire college, how long is the training?
Okay, so in Poland, just to give you a general idea, you can choose 3 paths. You either go to be recruited from what we call from the street, that is through the municipal headquarters.
Yeah.
Then you go through basic firefighter training, which currently lasts 5 months.
Yeah.
Or you can apply to a fire college that gives you a degree of technician, fire safety technician, that is 2 years. And the third path is you go basically to study fire safety engineering, and that is 4 years, and it's an academy. All of them are uniformed, courses or schools. And after each, you get one of the 3 recognized levels in firefighting profession in Poland. That is firefighter, fire technician, or fire engineer, fire safety engineer. So I spent 4 years there as a daytime student, wearing a uniform, attending all kinds of lectures, serving in the fire station of the school, which has one neighborhood in Warsaw, as in the capital city, as the protected area. And we did all sorts of things like in fire schools, apart from regular classes to become engineers in fire safety. We had shifts. We had shifts in the command center. We had all sorts of practices in our home headquarters and so on. So it took 4 years, and after 4 years, I graduated as a lieutenant, and I received the degree of engineer of fire safety.
So, first off, just a short one. Did that mean you get then you have to apply for a job at a fire service, or are you automatically assigned anywhere? Do you apply? How do you work? Is it because is the fire service national?
It is a national fire service. Yeah. It's centralized. We have national headquarters, 16 regional headquarters, and slightly above 300 municipal headquarters under those 16 regions. So when you come, when you apply and you get selected, or you pass the exams for the to the fire school, you are from this day a firefighter, but in special mode, like a candidate.
Okay.
After you finish whatever is your training, so in the first case it's 5 months, or in the second case it's 5 months and 2 years, or in the third case, my case, is 5 months introductory course and then 4 years. After that, you become a regular firefighter. But on papers, since day one, you're a firefighter. So basically, first you have to pass exams, then medical examination, psychological tests, and so on. And then you continue to be a firefighter, but what we call in candidate service. So as long as your training lasts, in those 3 cases, you're a candidate. Then, which means you get less salary and you're a cannon fodder for all kinds of, like floods or whatever, chicken flu or you name it. Yeah.
So when you look back at your like how much of your how would you describe the fire behavior training in terms of theory during your school time?
Well, I will say honestly that as I look at it today, I was not equipped properly to understand what kind of valuable training I'm receiving. And also probably because of the fact that it was not delivered in a very attractive way. Because we had some advanced fire theory, and well, not a lot of practice at that time. And I don't mean here we didn't have shifts, because we had shifts in the urban setting, but we didn't have a lot of, let's say, hot fire training sessions. So the theory was overwhelming, or even I could say sometimes it was boring. So there wasn't much interest in that. And some of my colleagues whom I admired actually understood this stuff. And after many years, I'm learning all that stuff again, and I'm trying to remember whether I had this in my training curriculum, and I did. And I did. So like always with a young person, like I look at this as a little bit of a wasted opportunity. I had this delivered on a silver plate, but well, I wasn't mature enough probably at that time to get use of that, to make use of that. But also I have to say that it was predominantly theoretical training and not a lot of practical components.
So what do you think? You allude to it, that what the problem was. So if you look at, do you think, if you look back, does it feel like the information was good, but it was just delivered in a well, at least boring way, but not effective way?
Yes, it was like that, as you mentioned, and also I think that the teachers didn't have a lot of connection with the practical part of firefighting. So even now, when I try to remember some of the examples that we used to explain some theory, like heat transfer, I remember we were calculating some very complex problem of heat transfer difference between single pane window glass and double pane window glass, and it was all, let's say, interesting and let's say relevant. Well, today I would really like to go back to that kind of calculation and understand it, but let's say there are many more practical calculations that you can make that really relate to the fire ground. Like now today I'm focusing on effects of heat radiation on firefighters, and I'm looking into concepts like thermal classes, where you have both temperature and heat flux as some, let's say, levels of heat exposure, which is like normal and just only approved or appropriate for a short period of time, or is critical and shouldn't ever be exceeded at the fireground. Well, that's very practical knowledge, at least as much as it gets from theory to practice. Well, when I think about heat transfer through the window, well, if I studied construction, maybe that would be a good example, because then my goal as a professional would be to prevent, flats and houses from losing heat. But my professional problem isn't that; it's something else. So I would say that the teachers had great knowledge, doctors, professors, but didn't have a lot of connection with the practical part. And I know, because I'm in constant contact with my colleagues, younger colleagues who continue to study in that school and graduate from that school, that it's improving. It's improving over the years. So I'd really like to go back to that school with my current mindset and go through it again.
So do you think like let's start this. How old is that way of training firefighters, or in this case, fire safety engineers? How old is that school?
Oh, maybe it's a shame to say, but I don't know how old exactly, but definitely it started after Second World War.
So you've had that 3-level entry in the fire service back?
Well, at least no. I mean, this before 1992, when major organizational changes happened in Poland. Also, it was just a couple of years after we switched, let's say, the political system from communism, or being under the influence of communist regime, to, let's say, democracy and capitalism. But in 92 there was a major reorganization of the country, of the state itself, and it included a lot of things. And one of the things was that the state fire service was created. So there was a special act on state fire service, and we have become a individual service. Before, we were more connected to the military service, sort of. So like today, like my rank is equivalent to major in the army. So it used to be the major of the fire service. Now I'm called a brigadier. So let's say even the ranks have changed, which means that the service itself gained a separate identity. So let's say that at least from early 90s, it was like that. There was also, because we have ranks, so it's still a little bit like military based, but not entirely. We have ranks, so and we have corps of ranks. So there's a corps of privates, sub-officers, aspirants, and officers. And recently, the first corps, they merged. So the privates and sub-officers are one corps of ranks. Then we have aspirants, which are like a mid-level commanding personnel, and then officers from lieutenant upwards, up to the general. So there's still some of that military structure left, but it's more sort of tailored at separate individual fire service with, let's say, some initial identity, I would say, because identity of the service and of the firefighter is something a bit on the side of that. When we understand what our mission is and how we are supposed to work as firefighters, or when there's no lesson in the book about the situation that we're facing, how we're supposed to act, and we sort of refer to our understanding of our mission. So I would say that we're still struggling with the mission as firefighters, and it's because of the modern world threats like coronavirus, swine flu, or all that kind of stuff. Because I don't know how it works in different countries. Over here, it's like okay, let's send the firefighters and then we'll think. And we always said that temporary means usually lasts forever. So it's like that. So yeah, maybe I'm off topic a little bit, but to give you to give you an idea how it looks.
Is it? Do I understand it correctly that the 3-tier entry, that you can go straight from the street and then to college or an academy, it's coming from the military system of having officer ranks that had like a military academy?
It is,
so
yes.
So it's modeled on that side. So it hasn't been like, because in Sweden, and I think a lot of countries have a 2-tier system or a 3-tier system where people come in not from the bottom up. You can have people sliding in. Sorry, I'm gonna change the battery. But there has been like problems. Like in Sweden, we have always had bottom up. You start as firefighter and you go all the way up until the 70s, I think, when the fire protection engineer program started working together with the fire services to educate people directly to the fire service. So fire protection engineers were before that only used for like fire prevention and building construction and all those things, but now there were like an add-on year. I don't know if it was an add-on year to start with, but at least they were training people for the fire service. And when the fire protection engineers came in, they went in sideways. They became officers or equivalent, or at least after some time in the job. And that created a tremendous amount of friction to start with, because there was a lot of people that was on the way up, and all of a sudden there's this young person swoops in and takes their position.
Yeah, well, I will confirm that with a slight comment that it's been decades, and even in the former system, that we have had a dedicated fire service, fire academy. So the higher education for firefighters, let's say fire safety engineering, as a separate a curriculum taking place in a dedicated fire school, has a long history here. So in a way, the friction or the problem is created by not always clear rules of how people that hold higher education, have higher degrees, enter the fire service from the level of the officer, but them not being graduates of the full-time or even part-time studies in the fire academy. They only take short sort of training to, let's say, I don't know, 9 months instead of 4 years, since they already have some degree, like masters or engineer in some field of knowledge.
You can do a shortcut in that case.
Yes, but then you're also not entitled to act in every capacity of the fire service. Like there's a special training that you have to follow still to command at a certain level. And then if you're staying in a headquarters, then people only see your rank. Your rank is the same as somebody else's that spent, let's say, many years on the job, and they went through private corps, aspirant corps, and now they're very experienced, and they're, let's say, finishing studies, or they did some other studies like, I don't know, environmental protection, which is a useful sort of education in the fire service, or so on. And well, if you look at those two people, their rank is the same. They maybe hold the same position as well, but there's no balance between their usefulness, basically. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but in a way,
at least usefulness on paper.
And then so it's basically like that. But the main difference is something that we've always took pride in, that we have had a dedicated fire service academy for many years, decades of years.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Going back to school. So when you are on your academy, how much similarities are there between the academy and the college in terms of what you are being taught about how to fight fire? Do you know if there's like two separate tracks and they don't talk to each other, or is there very good connection between them so that if you go to college or to the academy, when you arrive out, you can work together because you think about fires in a similar way?
I will say that it's been a bit different for many, many years, but currently, as of maybe 2012, there's been a lot of work carried out on the national level, starting from the bottom to the bottom, on redesigning or defining the catalog of necessary skills and knowledge for each field of activity. So I think we started with rope rescue, basic level, because we said, okay, firefighters will go to rope rescue situations. They will encounter hazmat problems. They will have technical rescue. They will have rescue on water, rescue on ice. They will fight fires, and they will maybe encounter a collapse and so on. Do we have specialist teams? Yes. So they have separate training, separate equipment, and they are governed from the central headquarters. What about the rest? Well, the rest has to reach a certain minimum. So let's build the minimum. So for rope rescue, a number of devices, a number of techniques, a number of knots, and everybody has to know that. So once it started like that, there was also a two-way approach. One way is whoever is in the service and was not taught in the new way will have to go to a training center and finish the course. And after so many years, we'll have all the personnel trained. For the people who enter the service as new firefighters, whether in the private corps, aspirant corps, or officer corps, they still have to go through those programs. And in addition, they will go through whatever else they have to. But these programs will constitute the basic firefighter training, which at the moment lasts 5 months. But in those 5 months, in half, there's a couple months of practice in the fire in the fire station. Yeah. So like maybe 2 or 3 months basic skills, practice in the fire station. Then they go back for another 2 or 3 months. I think, and they finish, and they are now basic firefighters. For organizational reasons, like when you enter a fire college or a fire academy, then you get it in parts. But still, the main goal is to get you this first part that allows you to have practice in the fire station, because then you go to the school. Well, first you start off in the forest, in the camp, tents and bonfire, all that kind of fun, and running through the wood and chasing deers and stuff, and running for breakfast, running for dinner, running for supper, and so on and so on. But then you go to the school, and then you get practice, and then you get also other things that you're supposed to learn. In this way, and with the introduction of consecutive courses. So we started, as I said, in 2012, I think, with rope rescue, then some technical rescue and so on. I was involved in creating the extinguishing structural fires program. In 2015, we introduced that alongside with the creation of the training infrastructure, about which you may have heard. Yeah. As well. And so 8 years later, I think we'll have a good results, and there seems to be a mutual understanding, regardless where the firefighter is coming from or which school he was attending, and then he may have been sent to another location. Everybody sort of starts speaking the same language. So we're going towards unification, which is the only logical way, not only for a fire service in the country, but especially for a centralized fire service like we are.
Yeah. So what do you if you were to, like, most fire services in the world are not national, like Sweden, it's fractioned, like in different cities have their own fire brigades, and that I would say that's the norm in the world. Most fire departments are not are city based, because I guess they started as insurance brigades, or they started as a city fire brigade and grew from there. Now, many of those fire brigades have merged into regions and so on, but there's still self-government to a lot of them. Now, the upside of that would be probably that it's easier to the smaller organizations, the easier it tends to be to make changes, to get everybody to do the same thing, and so on. But the obvious downside is that you have in Sweden I don't even know how many it is. Let's say it's 200 fire services in Sweden. You have 200 slight variations of how do you do firefighting.
Yeah.
Well, if you were to design your perfect fire service and only looking at fire as a baseline, would you like it to be a national fire service, or would you?
For Poland, or because it's also important.
You can open that question in any way you like.
Well, I never thought about it in this way. To have a ready answer for you, so let's make some brainstorming right now. Well, I remember explaining it to someone in 2014. In 2014, when we were meeting at the IFIW in Olsztyn, I was standing in the airport and speaking to some guys and explaining the Polish fire service system, and I remember then thinking to myself, what are the upsides and downsides of that kind of system? And this thought has accompanied me since, and I didn't really change a lot of my thinking. So obviously the downside is that it takes a lot more to introduce changes. And especially that the system is centralized, it's also very dependent of the, let's say, political arena. So whenever there's a change in the political arena, like another party wins, well, of course they will change all the key chiefs, of all the services. And the chiefs usually change deputies, and they also change directors of departments. So then, after spending so many years on explaining what we have done so far and how we would like to continue and why it makes sense, and allowing for asking all the questions and suggesting, usually because there's usually I would say that there's usually good atmosphere for discussion, but then again, sort of new people come in and they have ideas and they say, why are you doing this this way? And then you start explaining. Now we have 30,000 professional firefighters and probably 300,000 active volunteers, and another 300,000 just volunteers who are not operationally active, and so on. So it's a huge crowd that creates a lot of, let's say, disorientation, basically, can create. And if you're not recognized already as a person who has some knowledge and has good, let's say, ideas and has some rate of success after implementing your ideas, then it's not easy to get through. So that's the difficulty. The good part, stemming exactly from the same fact from the national structure, is that once you introduce something, it's very stable and it's binding for everyone. So there's a way of working with an idea and then making it binding for everyone. I have a
You're Sorry, you're breaking
Okay,
up. Wait for it. Yeah. It was good. Twitch and the connection. You're good again.
Okay. So what was the last thing?
Oh yeah, well,
that
you said that. You was basically just the last part. So you said about the upsides of the government, that it's very stable and everybody does the same thing.
And it's my impression, it's my understanding that even when there's municipal services, there has to be some governing level, at least in general, rules or guidelines or something. Yeah, it's either by some commission or maybe the schools dictate some understanding of the mission, of the technicalities, and so on. So what we're seeing right now is the tendency to admit that we keep a lot of uniformed personnel that doesn't have to be uniformed at all. So there's also a tendency to speak, and we've been talking about this for many years already, so I'm not sure if it's a trend or just a thing that people are talking about. Yeah. But if you have HR department or financial department or probably other departments as well, you have to keep uniformed personnel over there and create those different, unclear ways of becoming an officer, because once you're in headquarters, you're supposed to be an officer. That's the aspiration, at least, and so on. So there's a tendency of thinking about moving some of these functions of a headquarters under the municipal office. So in a way, we're having a national system, but still, if we're on municipal level, majority of the budget comes from the mayor. If you're on the regional level, the majority of the budget comes from the governor, who is the representative of the government in the region. So either self-government or the government, but in a way, there's obviously, probably is the only logical way. There's a strong dependency on the administrative division of the country. Anyway, so I would say the system has more advantages than it has disadvantages, or maybe I'm just biased because I don't know anything else. That's also very possible, to be honest. I have no idea.
Or it's because you get to decide some of the things that everybody has to do.
Probably as well, yes, because I've worked a lot to create some understanding, to push forward, and I had great atmosphere, many people who helped, many people who understood. I always say that my point of honor is to praise decision makers, because they had all the possibility to say no, but they said yes, or yes, but, and then also I learned a lot of things. But it's nice to work with a stable system. That's for sure.
So, just one final question on that. Let's say on a national level, you let's say you hadn't used fans at all, just as an example, and now you say, well, we're going to do more ventilation. We're going to protect buildings and so on. So now every fire truck in the country needs a fan. And you say that, well, the budget is on different levels. Can the state then say just everybody has to buy a fan? Or is it up to each department? Or?
Oh, yes. And it's been introduced. And there's a national standard of equipment. Yeah. And we have types of vehicles. Like there's, for engines, for firefighting engines, we have... from the top of my head, I would say 5 or 6 types of engines, and they are usually classified in reference to pump capacity and tank volume. And each of those falling under this category, which let's say we have like 16 by 24, so that's 1,600 liters per minute pump capacity, and let's say 2,000 or 2,400 liters of water in the tank. It has a predefined set of equipment that has to be on it, and it's been like that for many years now. we've always had fans since they appeared. Somebody said, okay, it's a good tool. Let's put it on the engine. At least we'll be able to remove smoke. Yeah. The funny part is that, okay, now from this, a lot of different things happened, and separate services, separate fire stations, and we have more than 500 of full-time, and I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of volunteer fire services who also follow this this standard. Yeah. They all just did whatever they wanted, and so with this specific aspect, with this specific tool, we're only just slightly before introducing some national solutions. The Department of Training at the national headquarters has been working with us meaning the instructors in the country, throughout the country. Yeah. And we've met in 2016. Well, can I brag a little bit?
Yes,
can I
you can.
modest for a
Absolutely.
moment? Okay. We've been working on say level 2 CFBT training, or as we say, extinguishing structural fires training in 2016, and we wanted to introduce into that course, after the CFBT basic, we wanted to do ladder rescue, thermal imaging, and tactical ventilation. Now then I went to CERN to the Swiss fire service for the contract, and then I returned, and nothing happened since. And since I returned, I've been asked 2 times at least, shall we go for it? And so on. Yes, I will. Yeah, we're gonna go for it. But there's so many things that we need to do. I wrote a book that is like 750,000 characters that covers basic firefighting. It's been in review. There's so many work to be done. So, but we're getting there. This book very generally covers tactical ventilation, just mentioning different things you can do, not getting into much detail and so on. But we want to move there. So the basic training that really just touches on it, like, okay, don't open the door until you're ready with water. You can use a curtain, it works like that, but the flow path management is basically the role of your commander. So we're just starting to talk about certain things so that the firefighter carrying out basic tasks knows the terms, knows there's something going on, there's a bell ringing, but then we want to get there. So we're still in the process of building that. I know it's not perfect yet, but it will improve in time once we, let's say, go through all the stages that have been planned, and of course under the condition that political changes would not interfere with this process, and we will not have to explain again and again why are we doing this, and that we are actually in the 8th year of significant changes, I think. Yeah. So it's taking some time, but I can say also that we have some results as well. But to give you maybe a practical example, in 2015, I think, we were looking into a piercing nozzle, like a big fog nail. It was not a fog nail, it was like a larger tool, but the same principle. And there was a decision because we as a training center helped to maybe, suggest some changes that will make the tool more practical. So then the fire chief decided that he's going to buy these tools for all the fire stations. And then we said, okay, but these people need training. So we organized training for all the shift commanders and deputy shift commanders for all the fire stations throughout numerous days. And we've had the fantastic opportunity because we have a car tire factory in Olsztyn on the outskirts. So they have a lot of infrastructure. They were tearing down a big building. So we could pierce through the walls, really make a lot of destruction in the building. Then we also did some live training. I have a fantastic video from that training when we pierced the nozzle through the door, and there's such perfect gas cooling that under pressure of contracting gases, rips the door off the hinges and pulls them inside, just like in a horror movie.
I've seen it.
Yeah, and so that was one example of us taking an approach of, okay, we can buy all the tools for people, but since we're responsible for our region and we have this authority, we will also provide people training. And then shortly after, I think was the first day, one team of 24 guys was training, because we had plenty of these piercing nozzles. There was a lot of play, so we divided into groups and we did all, nice and cool stuff, and was all hands on and a lot of satisfaction. And just the day after, I received the call that, okay, we had this fire and it was just under ventilated, so we used it. It was fantastic effect, and immediately there was such a good feedback and such good enhancement of the message, just straight from the training to the fire ground. So I could share this on another day of training immediately, and it was really nice. People accepted the tool a lot with less, let's say, opposition, which is always in place when there's new things coming. It was relatively new for a majority of people, and so yeah, it's like that. On national level is one thing, then on regional level is another. But we're living also in a world of information, so we're also making sure that all these information are being shared, and we have our, let's say, agents of change in all the regions. We communicate a lot with instructors, so whenever we do something regionally or even locally, we always share and try to inspire each other, and it's working really well. But I will say that this kind of the secondary thing that I mentioned, and the grassroots initiatives and the social media and the information age has provided tremendous improvement in the fire service. The only problem is that, like with everything, the selection of valuable information is now a challenge. Not the access to information at all, but selection of valuable sources. So yeah, another challenge for us as well.
Let me back up a little bit. When you get out of the academy, when was the first time you started realizing, when you felt like, first off, like, I gotta fix this, like I gotta this is something wrong here? Like, how did you get to that point? Because you said, you joined the fire service. Like, I would say your answer is the most common one I speak to, like, people, when I ask about, like, not because they always wanted to be a firefighter. It just happened to be that you became a firefighter, like me, like sweet, decent pay, good working hours, like, seemed fun. Like, I didn't, I didn't join like I am gonna change the fire service. Like, I had zero ambition to become like a fire nerd and change stuff. So where did that start, and what made it start?
Well, a lot of that is personal. I'm a specific person, like everybody is. Yeah. Well, in my case, which I understood after many years. I had the need in me throughout my life to work, to provide, and I will say I think I'm mature enough to say that I was also for a large part of my life concerned about how people perceive me also. Yeah. So it was one of important motivators for my work. Yeah. Apart from the fact that I always valued hard work. I was working as a kid. I was earning my, pocket money. I was working as a youngster, helping shores and so on. So I guess I was also raised to value work. Yeah. And but when I went to the fire station, and I started in Olsztyn in Fire Station 1. It took me maybe 2-3 weeks to understand that I was not expecting reality. I was expecting some some form of my own imaginary world, which
Yeah.
I didn't see at all. So I said, okay, this is how it looks. Okay, this is how things work here. Okay, and then I started approaching my colleagues because I had the need to understand. There was always this part in me that was making me want to perform in a proper way, because I understood from the beginning. I understood the responsibility of that profession. That
Yeah.
basically the number of hours you spent on training and preparing since you're not fighting fires or rescuing people will influence that. Because just like we hear from many of our common colleagues nowadays, I really like listening to John McDonough comparing firefighters to sportsmen. I think he also mentioned that he heard this comparison from somebody else as well, but he makes good comparisons. I mean, a sports champion spends hours, basically his whole life is training between the important matches. The
Yeah.
important matches for us are the responses, and this profession, well, gets risky, as we all know. So this was my understanding from the beginning. So I wanted to engage and really to do something. It coincided with the fact that when I finished my fire academy, went to work in the fire station, I started part-time studies as well, and I did my master's in the main school of fire service as well over the next 2 years. And master's engineer, so it was like an add-on for the engineering. So, and then, well, from my understanding at the time, I was very much into rapid intervention, firefighter rescue. I understood this as a very important component of improving safety of work as a firefighter.
It's
Well,
not.
my perspective has changed over the years, and I admit it. But well, I was thinking about saying this before we started recording, and I will say that I understood that it's a reactive approach, and the proactive approach is obviously more logical,
Yeah.
at least. But at the same time, some parts of this training give a lot of confidence of work with certain scenarios or
Yeah.
certain equipment and so on. So I will say that some selected parts of this training are still considered to be valuable by me.
Yeah,
But
well, it's like
I will
everything.
say,
It's very few
yeah,
things that are bad training. It's just in the limited amount of time what you choose to focus on, and
exactly.
it's like RIT training is very far down the list of in priorities. Not saying that it's bad or useless,
Yeah.
just a very low priority.
Well, once you
Yeah.
cover the basics, if you have time, train your ass off. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
yeah, but
absolutely.
but
I mean,
let's agree on the basic. And like
yeah,
like you said, what was the fire behavior training? And now
yeah,
we hear, like if you look to some of the presentations by our colleagues in the United States, when they say that throughout their training there's like 4 hours of fire behavior or two
yeah,
hours of fire behavior. Well, for me, that's way too little.
yeah,
I mean, if people spend more training, okay, that's good. Then we can say, once you've mastered this, you can also start thinking how to get out of trouble when you get into trouble. But basically, understanding fire is understanding how not to get into trouble in the first place.
yeah.
Well, okay, and but then that was my focus. I did a master's on it, on some analysis of how it is and how it could be and what are the chances and so on. And so that was my focus. And
What were some of your conclusions when you made that? Like, how, especially in types of like, how would you say
uh-huh.
effective RIT was performed? Like,
Well, um, it's even not that. I mean, I analyzed some of the regulations in the beginning, and I uh, faced them with reality,
uh,
and I said, okay, that we have some similar regulations that, let's say, uh, impose on firefighters air control.
yeah,
Are we doing that? No. So
okay,
are we
yes,
breaking the law?
yeah,
Yes, we are. Okay, air control is useful.
Yeah.
It's not RIT at all. It's like
Yeah.
safety of work, yeah?
Yeah.
Or are we keeping some personnel outside, or as like means of help if shit hits the fan?
Yeah.
Are we doing that? Yeah. Well, sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't, but in principle, we don't. We as a service didn't really realize that this is our obligation by law.
Yeah.
So my survey proved that there's a little knowledge of binding regulations.
Okay.
That was,
It was that
just
that perspective. Yeah.
something like that. That was
Yeah.
after year 2000.
Yeah.
So what are we doing to improve our confidence of working in BA
Yeah.
sets? So we had some nice training, but some of that could be improved because we use this what we call smoke chambers.
Yeah.
Or smoke cells, where we have theatrical smoke and like
crawling and
and stuff,
and things collapsing and
yeah.
strings.
Well,
And
that's partially useful, but also partially not, because it doesn't reflect any real firefighting situation.
Yeah.
But in a way, okay, once you are new to the fire service and you want to like see what could be the problems and so on, okay, it's good. Then people go through it periodically, every couple of years and so on. But what do we do on top of that? Oh, well, some people did this, some people didn't do this, and so on. Let's say that after the year 2000, there was still not so much unification, or at least I didn't see it. Maybe my view was limited at that time. I was not a very experienced firefighter at the time. So these were among my conclusions, but I also concluded that we don't even know about the idea of firefighter rescue. Did we have line of duty deaths? Yes. In fires? Yes. What were the causes? Some of there were collapse. There was not many, but there was collapse. Yeah. There was unclear circumstances, but probably severe fire conditions with some nasty fire load, styrofoam on ceilings and walls, and disorientation and uncontrolled access of air, and running out of BAs and using some strange small bottle BAs, too little bottle BAs, and so on. And there was like a chain of causes that led to the death of 2 firefighters. Well, a couple of years ago, there was also an accident with 2 firefighters. They were fighting a fire in a how you can say, like a warehouse that sold artificial flowers, basically plastic.
Okay, yeah.
And they were searching. It was after closing hours, so it was almost certain that there was nobody inside, but they were searching, and they separated from the hose line. And it's not certain if they secured themselves in any way, but they collapsed through a improvised roof. There was a structure inside the structure. They climbed on it, and it collapsed, and both of them died in this way. So we had some cases, and then what are our lessons? We are a service that does not publicly discuss this in a very ready manner. There's more, secret talk or let's say unofficial, not unofficial, but these kind of documents are not always entirely made public. Yeah. Basically, it's like that. Okay, so some of these conclusions revolved around these, topics. Are we learning from incidents? Are we really not learning? Are we using it to either blame someone or to understand where are the imperfections of our system, and so on?
So would you say that, well, part of your nature, but it was also your pursuit of a master's, was that a big contributing factor to you starting looking into problems and realizing I want to try fix this?
Yeah, well, some of let's say partially can be summarized that in the world, some fire services have a totally different perception of this kind of field of interest than we do. We have similarities in, of course, the mission. We have similarities in law regulations. We have similarities in equipment and so on. And yet we're still doing things in a totally different way. Can we learn something from that other way, or is some of our approach in a way superior, I would say, smarter or more logical than what is applied in the world? And so it was also an attempt to understand whether or not some of the missing, not present, because missing implies like we should have this, not present elements of this approach, which are present in other countries, realistically applicable in our country. So it was like that, maybe.
But why did you even start to look outside of the borders of Poland?
Well, I had a good friend who suggested to me that there is a topic that is totally missing in the Polish fire service, and I engaged in a discussion with him, and he shared with me some of his materials, some of his work. Apart from that, he was translating Paul Grimwood already in the early 2000s, so it was something that I liked. And then I understood also that there's an entire world of knowledge outside of my country's borders, and knowing the language good enough to be able to reach to these sources, even though they were not so accessible as they are today, like say 15, 17 years ago. It's an interesting and original work, which was also one part of the master's. It has to be some way original. It cannot be something that somebody already did around you or in that fire school, or so sort of like that.
So a little bit personality, a little bit of requirement for the masters brought you to look outside of Poland. Now, when did you start realizing? Well, in 2000, let's say after 2000s, what if you have a normal, if you have an apartment fire on the second floor, fire blowing out of the windows, smoke in the staircase, what would roughly a normal fire attack, first responding engine, and so on, what roughly how would it look like?
In after 2000?
Yeah, after 2000. Not today, but in 2000s.
Okay.
If you would like
that
to
would be,
guess.
Well, I don't have to guess. I witnessed it. I did it. Some of that. Well, I will say that it's not something I'm very proud of, but that was the way. That was the way. So I'll just be honest. When the fire was not confirmed, but there was smoke or like smell or something, usually there was one engine sent. But the dispatcher was alert and waiting, give me more information, because if there's something going on, I'm going to send you more, resources. But unless it was outside the city, then okay, let's not risk it. Let's send more. But I remember going to a fire like that. Was very early in my first days of being a crew commander. On the 7th floor, actually. And there was not a lot of smoke showing, so we didn't have a full crew, and there was a young guy that I didn't notice that didn't take a BA, so in the end we ended up with one guy in the BA and a hose reel on the staircase, and luckily there was not a lot of fire. Basically.
So he went in alone?
Sort of like that, yeah.
It wasn't the best example of following
Well,
regulations, then.
no, it wasn't.
What
It
was
wasn't.
your? Do you have to be a
But
minimum of two and a hose line to be
yes,
inside? Do
it
you need a
wasn't
hose line?
exactly. Well, that's the problem. That's the problem that I always say, at least maybe this is my understanding caused by my experience, but I always say that tactics is largely a set of personal opinions. And because until today, even though everybody will say you have to have a charged hose line, you will not find it.
Everyone would not say that, but a lot of people would say that. Yes.
A lot of, okay, in Poland,
Yeah.
let's say in
You
Poland,
have the entire America. You have entire America with the truck companies who would definitely argue.
Okay.
That
No,
but in Poland.
I meant Poland. I meant Poland from the beginning.
Yeah.
And if not, vast majority of people will say that, then at least people who audit and control will demand that. So in a way, they are sort of imposing that as a standard. I don't think, and I think I should know this, I don't think I can point black on white text that says that.
Okay, so
that actually imposes that.
Yeah.
You know, like
it's seen as best practice, or it was seen as best practice, but not a rule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even until today, well, it's changing, but even until today, using a hose reel, and we have 19 millimeters hose reel, which aren't so good. They're not really that good.
Yeah.
By many, firefighters are accepted and used for structural firefighting, fighting fires in flats, because they're more convenient.
Yeah, they're more convenient.
There's less, fatigue and so on. And I will say, okay,
less cleaning afterwards.
Yeah, for me, well, it's not acceptable. I often have discussions with people when I say, okay, look, I mean, it's not a comfortable job, but my role as an officer is to envisage a safe working system and to have fail-safe solutions. Is that the term? Fail-safe?
Yeah.
Like if it fails toward the safe side.
Yeah.
So even if you're struggling more, well, you actually shouldn't, because it's a lot of struggle to get a hose reel upstairs.
A hose reel up to 7th floor. That's a daunting task. There's a lot of bends you have to move yourself backwards. So
because it's stiff and so on. But then even if you're in a way thinking that laying a traditional 52 millimeters hose line, because that's our standard.
Yeah.
Recently we started using 42, but standard is 52.
Yeah.
Even if you think it's more challenging and so on, but then you have plenty of water. I mean, you can do whatever or retreat safely if it's really getting bad.
Yeah. But if the 52 is the option from hose reel, I really get it, because 42 or possibly 45 is if you get above that, you need a lot of manpower and or skill to move that hose line efficiently.
Once it's charged.
Once it's charged. Yeah, absolutely. When it's dry, it's not bad. So
the approach in the 2000s would be that one or two teams or crews are going, engines are going. Probably you'll get a lot of people, because at that time we were not in the EU, so we didn't have the EU regulated working week. So we really worked a lot of hours. We had a lot of over hours. So and so either
by choice or by ordering.
By inertia, by it's always been this way.
Okay,
I don't know.
Nobody
just came.
Yeah.
And I noticed that. But let's say we had 25-person shift, out of which 20 people were on shift always. And today the same fire station is like 15 people. So that's 5 people less.
Yeah.
In the biggest fire station in the city. So that's significant. That's one almost fully packed engine. fully staffed. But let's say we could really count for 10 or 12 people on 2 engines, and at least 2 more on the ladder, because the ladder had to have an operator and a commander as well.
Yeah.
There's no ladder without the commander, even though he's only commanding the the ladder operator.
Yeah, we don't.
Well, sometimes the shift commander hopped on this, and he went. So a lot of manpower, but the approach was flooded.
Flooded from inside, outside, doesn't matter.
No, basicly from inside.
Was there, like, when you started, was there, like in America, like this warranted or not, but hostility, like you do not put in water from the outside? Was that an issue, or was it just sort of something you didn't really do?
You know, that was not practiced, but the reasoning behind it was, you need to get water on the fire, so go inside. And so that's one team, and then another team will connect the pumps, another will look for the hydrant, and everybody's doing something. So in a way, that was also the result of the training in the 90s, where there was pretty much a lot of people always to do the job. And when you had like 2 types of engines, you know, like very old engines, we only changed the equipment after we entered the EU in 2004. But you have either Jelcz, Polish vehicle, or Star, another Polish vehicle. And there were 2 types of vehicles. So, and you even had a book for basic fire training, when it showed you from between 3 to 8 people, including 2 that went on foot. So 6 was the number of seats, but between 3 or 8 people, everybody had a pre-identified task.
Yeah.
So that was actually very good, because once people show up, based on your seat, everybody knows what to do, and there's always more people than needed. But maybe not always the resources were being used in an optimal way,
efficient way.
So, but I would say that's a lot of water from inside, and gas cooling was not something that people knew about. So there was
there anything said that
nozzles with small tips.
Was there anything like where you taught to not put water on smoke, or was it just something that they were never taught? Firefighters were never taught it, so they didn't do it.
Both.
There was don't put water on smoke.
In many places, by many people, there was something like that. You know what? In the journal of the national headquarters of the State Fire Service 5 years ago, I read this statement by an officer of prevention who was talking about prevention and about reality of fires in flats based on statistics, based on prevention regulations. And I read that sentence and I said, it's 2015, and I'm reading by a high-ranking officer, I have to admit. Unless you see the seat of the fire, hold your water. I can't believe it.
It was straight out of old books. Now I guess in Sweden, when I was taught in early 2000s, there was nobody saying that you couldn't spray water on the outside. I mean, we were doing gas cooling, so that was in 2000s. Gas cooling was not a thing, but like spraying water from outside, that was not something that was said you can't do that. It was just that we only trained on interior firefighting. So the norm was interior firefighting. That's the only thing we did. It was just that's how you do firefighting. It took a long time before you go like, well, why aren't we spraying water from the outside? Or in that case, somebody maybe 10 years before that or 20 years before that said that it's useless. And then, or whatever might be the reason, I don't know exactly know, but it was simply into 2000 simply because we were not training it, and therefore we were not doing it. Nobody said you can't or you shouldn't. I mean, the only thing that existed was if you got firefighters inside, be cautious with water, because if you spring water there, you might steam the shit out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that we've all learned from improper use of water from outside and so on.
I also have to say that what I have encountered was a real local experience, and it was that time when there was not such unification as it is today, and I didn't even have ways of contacting other people. It was not my custom. I didn't know people, there was not, the internet was not so widespread as it is today. There was not so many, even websites, www websites, not to mention Facebook fan pages of fire stations. Today you have a city with 6 fire stations. They all have separate, fan pages. So you can learn about their reality day to day from this particular place. So what I'm saying is what I've experienced as well, and would probably not fair to say that that's the representative of the entire country and all the mindsets of all the people, because I know that I learned a great deal of fantastic firemanship from these old, sub-officers, brandmeisters, who, remembered the times that they didn't use BAs, and that was the custom in Poland as well. If you didn't take a shot before entering the fire engine, it probably was not a good intervention as well. So it was crazy times. These people surely remember these times. The people that were already old dogs when I came as a youngster, they had already 25 plus years of experience in practical firefighting.
I have a side mission that I haven't worked on it for 2 or 3 years now almost, but to interview all the people that's been retired, that's been very contributional to the development in Sweden and subsequently on the world, to get history recorded in their own words, and who they talk to and where did they talk to and where did they get ideas from and so on, because it's so important to understand history, to understand where we are. But that's a work in progress. When sometimes I'm
looking forward to that.
Yeah,
I've spent some time talking to Mats Rosander, who visited Poland, who gave me a couple of hours of his time to speak online. I spoke to Nils Bergström as well, so it was a great deal of insight, really.
Yeah, it's tremendously important to understand, because if you have especially if you have a different opinion, to understand. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe they are wrong, or maybe the situation just changed. Mm-hmm. The context changed, or how you view risk changed, or the typical organization changed, or this new improvement in equipment and so on. So there's a lot of times there's a contextual difference that makes it like why do ultra high pressure we had that in the 40s? Well, the technology was not the same. The understanding is not the same either. But they go we had that in the 40s or 50s. The technology might look the same on if you look on it like that, but it wasn't reliable, it wasn't efficient, and so on. So there is this technology, the development, that also plays an impact. But understanding the history, or at least trying to understand it, is just phenomenally important. And hopefully it prevents you from running in circle. But I find myself running in circles too. I'm going back to history, going they did that before, and they threw it away, that idea. But why did they throw it away? And you pick it up again. This looks awesome, and you kind of think about it. Am I just repeating the same error again? Out of can I learn from history? I go no, it sounds so good. Why did they drop it? Why did they stop?
I mean, look, now we are going back to looking at smooth-bore nozzles. It creates a lot of unrest, because we've spent so many years fighting for the good use of fog nozzles and so on. But I said,
Hey,
okay.
I'm trying to do that in Sweden. The heart of gas cooling with a fog. It's like
Yeah.
swearing in church. You go like, what did you say? You want to use a straight stream, or you want to go back to the '60s?
Yeah, yeah.
They're like,
Well,
yeah, maybe.
yeah, there's some, well, but like you said, so many things have changed. I mean,
Yeah.
we were using smoothbore nozzles, but they were very small tips.
Yeah, it's the same in Sweden. Like there was 75 liters a minute. Like, and if you were
Yeah.
just, and you would have to have permission to stack off, and they gave you like 150. And if you stack off the most, you give you 300. But that was rarely or never used. And we didn't do gas cooling, meaning we didn't open up until we saw flame. So
Then you
I mean,
get reaction force, which was different because
Yeah.
higher pressure, less water, but
Yeah.
higher velocity, more reaction
Yeah.
force. For what result? For not so
Yeah.
great results. So yeah, we really swallowed the new nozzles because they
Yeah.
were fancy and all, but as a service, in the 2000s, we didn't really use them properly.
Yeah.
Also, the selection, the purchases were not so good. The models, they didn't provide what you can actually do. The
Yeah.
best things that you can do with a fog nozzle. These features were often not present in the nozzle that people bought. It was just, oh, the new nozzle, the combination nozzle. Ah, yeah, that's the new thing.
Yeah.
It has a pistol grip, so now you can
Yeah.
grab it in a more secure way, so it's fun and so on. Now we're also looking into pistol grips, and I will say that I like it, but I can go without it. Depends on the circumstances a lot. So, but I'm not. What I say,
You're
I
not.
don't
You're not.
buy.
You're not a smoothbore die hard to go. Take during the nights when everybody's sleeping. You go out and take a saw and cut it off.
No, Lars taught me that I don't die for ideas, as I discuss. And when I discuss, I might actually learn something. And since I took this approach for many years, I learned a great deal. And I often engage in a conversation with a smile and soothing attitude. I try, okay, let's become. Tell me all about it. I'll listen now, then I'll tell you something. And then people start to share with you some really fantastic knowledge. And then they also open up and say, so, okay, tell me a bit about what you're doing. Well, look, doing this and then we think it works for this and that reason. Maybe this is not so optimal, but there's this or the other obstacle or whatever. And like everywhere, we're dealing with people's mindsets. So in the end, there's a way of reaching at least a good conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had this discussion many times before, but with I'm not saying I'm old. I'm still young, at least in heart. But like with experience of trying to change things, there's a healthy dose of I would now call it a healthy dose of, yeah, I'm not going to die on that sword. Like, I'm not going to dive on that sword. I mean, I ran on every problem in the beginning. Like, every fight was worth having.
Yeah.
And that's simply not true. Like, there's many battles, even if you're correct, that's the path to the goal is not worth the goal.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
So
Because in the end,
yeah.
what do you achieve? You achieve perhaps some awe in the eyes of a person that you don't really care about that is giving you this. I mean, what's the goal? The goal is just to improve yourself, somebody else, the fire service, understand better, take something from someone, offer somebody something, and just go on, and have fun.
Well, it's hard. I mean, if you are the kind of person that thrives on, I do not thrive on conflict, not at all. But I thrive on, or it's even a better word. I feel bad. It's more that I feel bad when things are not the way I think they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't thrive on making changes. I don't like to change myself. I don't like to change other people. I mean, everybody likes to be right. That's not the point. Everybody wants to be correct, and everybody wants to be good at what they do, even though what they do is up for debate. Like, what is it actually you do? But to see something you don't think is right and just ignore it. That takes like I feel physically ill. So it is this you have to, like, well, at least I have to actively rationalize with myself and say, hey Lars, just let it go. Don't go there. Like, focus on the bigger picture, focus on the things that are really valuable. Like right now, for instance, with a smoothbore or a straight stream, and like when I present in Sweden, I tell them, like, my opinion right now is I think we should use straight stream more. I think there's a lot of problems with fog. I don't think we're training enough, and I don't see us starting to train more. And I talk about straight stream and go like, but I'm not on a mission to change that. I'm just telling people what I think. If people don't want to change, I won't hunt them down. Like, you can do fog. This is not a big issue. Like, it obviously fog has been working fairly well for 30 years. Like, it's not like we have firefighters dying every day and so on. I mean, we're protecting ourselves, and the buildings are, not every fire building is burnt down. So you could kind of go like what is this a big problem? No, I just find it interesting for personal level, and I just tell people what I find interesting, and so it's not a thing that I've tried to change. But going back to when I was more part of making change, and it was part of my actual job description to make change, I was very good at diving at many grenades and going and I don't know, I never saw the struggle as something fun. It was a necessary evil. But going back to your, because when you, and going back again, if you, so like you described, you from how you look at it now, there was a lot of problems with firefighting back in 2000s. But when do you know if there was a specific point where I mean, everything is gradual, but do you know if there's any important moments where you start realizing that, hey, I need to really fix this because it doesn't seem like everybody else is doing it?
Yeah. In 2008, actually, I was transferred to work in the training center, and I received, so it was given
the regional training center,
the regional one, yes, and I received a task of being the fire tactics teacher. So it wasn't actually my choice. It was rather fate. Not fate, not coincidence.
Yeah.
Sorry. That was the word that I wanted to use.
Yeah. Well, it could be fate depending on how you look at it. But
yeah, of course. But it wasn't planned.
Yeah.
By me. By me. I didn't plan it. So
it was a scheme.
And part of and also part of what happened was that I knew English. So there was a trip organized to Luxembourg because we were invited as a Polish fire service to go and look at the 1.7 system for compressed air foam. It was organized by the manufacturer and so on. So we went there, and part of these demonstrations took place in a training facility which is called Ragtal. It's on the border between Luxembourg and Germany. Now, our common friend Dietmar knows this place and travels to it, so maybe you are familiar with the name Ragtal. What I saw there,
I've heard it, but I've never been there.
Okay, so for me it was my first contact with something else that then single compartment hot fire training structure, basically. Yeah. So I saw a complex of different structures, like, you know, corridors, rooms, and so on. And I said, okay, I mean, what are they doing here? I mean, it's so fantastic. This gives so many training opportunities. We used some buildings, some, you know, some whatever somebody had, like, even though we have been centralized and state-run fire service for so many years, you couldn't see a lot of this extending its influence on the infrastructure of training. It was rather that the regional training centers and the fire schools were left to handle this on their own. And whatever was the, you know, however smart and wise and well-organized people were, then they could organize something for themselves, and they had it, and it was their infrastructure for training. It was not yet the time and the mindset that large investments are necessary to build a proper, a decent training infrastructure. You just, you know, like, we had some basement. Okay, so we drilled in the basement. Some other region had some container, but it was not an ISO shipping container. It was just like some other metal box. So they trained in that. Some schools, which are bigger institutions and they are more capable, they had some other adopted means, basically infrastructure that was either existing, it was adapted for fire training, or was maybe created. But okay, so I saw this and I said, okay, I mean, we need to have this. That was 2008. And I started to, well, that was my dream. I had a dream, like Martin Luther King. And that was in 2008. Then I returned. I was teaching the fire tactics, fighting fires. But my interest was gradually shifting from, you know, like rescuing firefighters, all that kind of rescue stuff, towards fire behavior. And I've started corresponding with many people. I know that not everyone that I will mention or I have in mind, but I won't mention, is someone that maybe everybody will agree that it's a good, valuable source of discussion and so on. But anyway, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from many people. I said too much, so I will not mention any names. But some people were controversial at that time, but still they gave me a lot of, you know, food for thought. And I was thinking, okay, that's actually something very useful to think about and to consider and to change my training and so on. So in the course of next maybe 3 years, so until 2011 or 12, I spent a lot educating myself again about fire behavior. And I've discovered so many, you know, things that I didn't realize. Then I said, okay, it's really an ocean of knowledge. Also, probably around 2010 or 9 or 10, I read You're a Firefighter by Paul Grimwood, which was probably the first serious, good quality book that I've read. That made me realize that what, you know, firefighting instructor is about, or how to understand this topic at least. And then I started, you know, going back to maybe, okay, I realized I never read 3D Firefighting, so I took this book and I read it and I started understanding more. It, you know, covered also a lot of training. Then I started looking into Swedish books, the enclosure fires, fire ventilation, water and other extinguishing agents and so on. Then I started, you know, purchasing books from the States, like Positive Pressure Attack by Chris Garcia and his colleagues and so on. And, you know, there was a lot of knowledge boiling in my head, I understood that maybe, okay, this is not something that we will do for many important reasons. Okay, this is fantastic. We have to work towards this and so on and so on. But I kept on thinking, but we don't have the infrastructure to actually train. And I didn't even think about that national level. I was thinking about my regional training center, how to improve that. And you remember the story of the picture that I commented? It was in 2012, I think. You were in Croatia training with John McDonough and Sean Rafael.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, we arranged that it could come over.
Yeah.
So I used this as an opportunity to promote the let's say, modern CFBT approach to firefighting. Just that year, prior to them coming, we had a national workshop where we went to Western region, and they had a cross-border cooperation with another German region, and everybody was so hyped about a burn building that they built from EU money that costed probably like 4 million euros, and it was a gas building, but the problem was that it was 2 degrees Celsius at the day of our visit, and we couldn't use fire because it would destroy the building. And I said, okay, look, I mean, there was a director of training there. I said, look, please send people to Olsztyn in June, and I'll show you something else. And I spent a lot of time discussing after hours, like late night, almost early morning, like what it is that I have in my mind, that I, swallowed some knowledge from the outside. The thing is that Polish firefighters went to Sweden in the 90s, and they learned, and they introduced some of that stuff, but there was never something that bind this together, like a training curriculum. Nobody ever did any instructor training. This concept was not even present. How did you become an instructor? One day you were transferred to another division, and by this act you became an instructor. Like, for the needs of service, from next month, you, sir, or you, madam, will work as an instructor for the fire service in the training center, and then deal with it. I mean, be ready, you're a firefighter, be ready. So, and then I realized, okay, instructor training is the key component, because of course the infrastructure, the curriculum and so on, but we have to have people who understand what they're doing and have to be professional in training other people. Only then we can think about tackling the matter in a serious professional manner. So I used this opportunity of our Australian colleagues visiting Olsztyn to organize the first conference, on the International Conference on Structural Firefighting. Then we had this event annually. The year after was the IFIW, and after the IFIW 2014 in Olsztyn, I was, I remember, because we're allowed to do some sports in office hours, because it's our, we have to keep fit. So I was, jogging through the forest around my training center, thinking about this, thinking about that. And I'm receiving a phone call from the director of training at the national headquarters. And he's telling me, like, like my 6th kilometer, I'm so proud of myself, I'm jogging through the forest, I'm barely catching breath. And I'm like, yes, Mr. Director. And I was like, okay, you know what? I've been thinking, we're spending so many millions on fire trucks. Why don't we buy these, these containers that you mentioned? I said, like, I will call you in half an hour. I'm running back to my office. I'm catching my breath, and I will call you. Then, okay, so I ran back. I called him, and he said there is potential, there's possibility to get a good amount of money. We're talking about like an equivalent of nearly 5 million euros for creating an infrastructure for Poland. and because I mentioned, okay, well, it's not important what exactly do we have as long as it's good, but since we are a national service, we should have it everywhere.
Yeah.
It should be the same. We have the state fire service. We have what's called the National Firefighting and Rescue System. And we have a centralized system in the entire Poland, and we have the same catalog of skills and knowledge and skills and knowledge for every firefighter. So we should also approach the training challenge in a similar manner. We have to make unification, but it has to be careful. So we say, okay, I already had a good idea about what is the modern day firefighting as CFBT understands it, and what we are missing from that should be implemented for us to be able to say that we're trying to be very professional, work safely, work very effectively, understand what we're doing, why we're doing this, what tools are we using, what tools we shouldn't be using because they are either waste of money or time or something. Just to give one example, you open any catalog of any manufacturer, you get 50 nozzles, 50 types of nozzles. How many types do you need? 3? Not 50. So why don't you have 50 nozzles on each engine? Because you need like 3, like a good smooth bore, a good fog nozzle, and a piercing nozzle. When you have that, you multiply by number of engines, or maybe a couple of these per engine, and then, like we say, all the fires in the world, you can fight with this, or most of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was this kind of mindset that was starting to be created, and these international conferences gave us a lot of recognition for what we're doing. And year after year, we invited the entire IFIW team. Then year after, we had Mats Rosand and Michael Reich with the smoke curtain, and then I don't even remember who else. Jens Stiegel was there. Who else? Well, I may do injustice to some people that I will not mention, but we had the next year we had Craig Weinschenk talking about some FDS stuff, how it relates, how we can understand fire dynamics better by recreating the events and how they led to some fatal fires. We had Artur Nalic talking again about the 3T model, like you use whatever is useful from any approach and you mix it into a very optimal and a very effective strategy, provided that you first of all understand them all, have a good skill of understanding what's your problem, and then you can like you have the skills, you have the knowledge, you have the equipment, and then you just really flexibly apply the best parts of each and every tactic and tool and technique, and then we kept on inviting people. But basically there was a tender, we designed the prop, but the approach was, okay, we understand the catalog of skills and knowledge. Now let's see what kind of scenarios do we need to have in order to be able to teach people those. And let's say we need like a number of scenarios that will cover maybe as much as 90% of the skills and knowledge, leaving some flexibility to the improvisation and the intention of the instructor. But let's say that the system should have in place the majority of solutions. So based on the catalog of skills and the scenarios based on those skills, we then designed the training prop. And then by designing the training prop, we provided everyone with the technical means of carrying out the catalog of skills and knowledge in these scenarios, and we wrote a national training program. So more or less at the same time, we did a number of things. And we introduced the national training program, which became binding for everyone, and it set a standard. And then we started training instructors. to deliver those. Before the delivery of training props took place, we started training teams of instructors, and we also took a quite controlled approach, because the group of people, less than a dozen of people that have worked on the training program and have written the training program together, again, I will not be falsely modest, and I will say that 90% of that program is my work, in my work time and spare time and holiday and private computer and so on. But okay, so only these people taught the instructors, the future instructors. So in a way, without having an official structure, we already decided that there will be also levels, like instructor and senior instructor, trainer and train the trainer, sort of. Still not reinventing the dynamite. It's something that is just a normal approach everywhere in the world. Like if you teach a driver to drive, then once he receives his driving license, he doesn't become an instructor of driving. Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, it's just sort of the same logical structure. Now, the problem became when everybody got the props, but we weren't ready with the cohort of instructors, so there was a little bit of freelancing and so on. So it spoiled the effect a little bit, but we're now trying to go back to it and to reinstall the very defined rules of how this system should work, because we already have the basic training program, the identical 24 multi-container props in 24 I'm sorry, there's some bug flying here, in 24 locations, them being 16 training centers, 22 locations, 16 training centers and 5 fire schools, and in one densely populated area, just another training structure. And let's say probably a couple hundred of instructors that were trained in vast majority by the same people over the few years in the same manner. But we now are looking into some more advanced system of controlling this, quality control and competency maintenance. Because now we're seeing that we need maintenance of competencies, or we will more or less share the fate of our colleagues who returned in the 90s from fantastic training in Sweden, and then they all started to, go their separate ways. So yeah, that's where we are right now.
So you say for 22 sites, like roughly how many instructors would you say you have?
I'm not entirely sure, but I think that we surely have over 300. Over 300 we should have, which is not enough. Because no, we don't have. We trained, and from the initial team of, let's call them senior instructors, I think already 3 or 4 people retired. Not all of them were old firefighters. Some of them decided to retire as young firefighters. So this nucleus of people who met so many times and decided and designed the system for the country is already also melting. The group is melting. So there's a lot of different challenges. But what we want to do, because we have a 3-level prop, but we have only ground level training program. And obviously people want to go upstairs and see what's interesting over there, and if we put the fire here and open this window and there's a like the chimney effect on the staircase and blah blah blah, we need to address that as well with our second national training program, which will focus on, as I mentioned, ladder rescue, thermal imaging, and tactical ventilation, which of course will be only accessible to people that have already graduated from the basic training. And same will be for fire instructors. First, you go through the basic training yourself, regardless if you're a private or an officer or whoever you are. You go, or you have already went through this, or you go through this, then you go through the instructor training, and then you can only, climb the ladder upwards. But still, this is something that we're trying to put on paper as we speak. So and I've been trying to do this for the last 2 years.
How long was the first course for the instructors?
To become an instructor, you have to first go through 5-day training, and then as a student, cfbt training, and then after that, you have to go through another 5 days of instructor course. So we have 5 + 5 to become an instructor at this moment.
Yeah. So nobody is happy with the amount of time and so on, but you created a program so they have something to take with them back home, and you have 5 + 5. 5 is to get the experience of how it is to go through the program, and 5 is to actually teach it. Given the fact that we have the poor material to work with and we have excellent material to work with in terms of how good the instructors are to begin with, are you fairly happy with what you think the outcome was of that training? I mean, it will start to spread if you don't have quality control, so that's somewhat, that's somewhat something you have to account for. But are you happy with what the product was when you let them go back home?
In majority of cases, but not always. Not always. And I will say that I'm not happy with myself for a couple of people, let's say, that I said, okay, you can pass. I wasn't very happy. Well, I'm struggling because, like if you go to school and you learn to read, you can get in Poland we have 1 to 6 grades. They're 6, you're like perfect. You're more than the program is requiring you to do. 5 is you're very good. 4, you're good. Then you're decent. Then and so on. Can you be decent or satisfactory in rescuing life? I mean, what's that? I mean, the person lives, but the person lost his legs, or he's crippled, or his brain functions are not good, but he's alive. I mean, sometimes this is the philosophy I'm trying to still create in my mind, whether we should be very binary on this, pass, non-pass, or okay, let's say it's good enough, and then okay, you can go. I'm not happy with everyone. But then probably it's more on the personal side of the nature, where you don't want to engage in a situation where because once you say A, then you have to continue. But we had some cases of removing people from the course. Yeah. So it's not that they didn't finish with satisfactory results, but they were rather removed for other reasons. It's
but all of those instructors, they were basically just ordered because of bureaucracy, or how were they selected? Or can you also volunteer to become an instructor, or
For the system, for the official system, you have to be designated by a fire chief, and then some people are designated because due to the lack of other candidates, and some people are designated because they are living this and they want to do this, and then they are always active, and the chief sees that and he sends them to this training. But we have been training instructors for, well, let's say different institutional needs. One part is people who actually work in an institution, either a school or a training center, or sometimes it becomes more popular in recent times. They are members of a fire station that are close to the training center, and they are skilled enough to become support for the team of instructors working with that particular training structure. But also we have all this that I mentioned to you before about how people either go through the new catalog of skills and knowledge either when they enter the service, regardless of the level, or they are in service and they have to go to the training center and in the course of a couple of years receive all different kinds of training. And this process, the second process, is supported by 2 instructors per each shift, per each fire station in the entire country. So basically these people, there's a limited number of people that don't actually have the possibility to work frequently with the training program and the training structure, but their role is to envisage, to make sure that in their fire station, the product that is the training curriculum is delivered in the correct way through the ongoing training carried out inside this fire station. So they will do everything they can do, like they will be able to supervise or provide lectures, demonstrations, nozzle practice, search, and so on and so on. They usually lack only the possibility to do live burns. So for the live burns, they either periodically come back and so on. Well, we cannot provide everyone with the same opportunity in the entire country because it's just not possible. But every couple years, this is the system that is now being implemented. Every couple years, everybody will go back to the training center, not go back. They will go to the training center, every firefighter, and they will have a number of sessions that will at the same time constitute some form of exam for them, periodical exam. Like they get exam on medical activities, medical evolutions, or they get exam on rope rescue basics, and then they will also be examined on, let's say, attack and retreat as one selected session of the training curriculum.
So let's say I mean, from our perspective, like Sweden is anarchy, and for good and for bad. It's, every fire service does what they want, and there's fire schools, they're national, but they don't have like any authority to decide anything. So they're very like defensive in how they teach. And people go to the national fire schools, and if they like what they're being taught, they will bring that back home, and maybe some will listen to them or maybe not. So there's this, we're starting to scatter all over the place. There's nothing formal. If you want to be a fire instructor, you can go to your boss and they will say, okay, maybe, or not. Depends on the boss. There's no national training program, anything. And I mean, back in the day when Lisa Bergström and Mats Rosander, it was more structuralized. There was actual lesson plans, and there was curriculums, and there was plans, but for multitude of reasons, a lot of that has just changed, and we're stuck in, I don't know, but a lot of it is, if it weren't for a couple of individuals, I would say the system would just fail. Because there's no structure to maintaining enough competency. So you're gradually eroding the system of knowledge, and that works for some period of time because Sweden had a good start. We had a good foundation and so on. But that you can't live on old merits for just long.
Forever.
You can't live on old merits. But so right now I would love. I mean, you don't have to be a state fire service to have a nationwide system for how do you train firefighters, or how do you have levels of instructors and so on. It just fire services just have to value it and say, hey, this looks like a good idea. But right now, and the last 10 years that I've peaked and pushed different buttons, there is absolutely zero interest in doing it. For I don't know really why. It's no difference to what I guess the state one. The problem with the fractured one, if I convince, or anyone who's interested in fire, if I convince one fire chief that, hey, we need to value, we're not as good as we think we are, and we need to we need to do more training, and for that we need to train instructors, and that costs money, or we need to build new training props, and that costs money. So there's always a money problem in the end. It just is. And if they convince one fire chief, there's 199 left. Like, nobody has that amount of energy to do that. You maybe convince one, and in 4 years you get another one you have to convince, and in 4 years another election you get another one, but you don't have 200 of them. Like that you have to convince, that you have to show them that we are not on the level we should be. We have these problems. So there's to get anything going in Sweden is just a nightmare. It's not because of ill intent and so on. It's just that there's nowhere to go, because we have a central agency, but they do fuck all. They just sit around turning papers into larger stacks of paper. So they're useless. So there's nobody that's trying to create any uniform structure. I mean, the only thing that exists is sort of like an unofficial network of instructors that okay, let's just try and
I've been wanting to show this from the beginning. So
yeah, your logo, yeah, it's fantastic. I mean,
unofficial network of instructors. Yeah. Well, just one comment.
Yeah.
Since I'm a member of a state-run institution, I'm not exactly motivated to comment on what you just said about the governing agency in any way.
Well, I mean, there's an inherent problem in government and so on, because the incentive structures are usually poorly designed. Like the incentive structures to do ultimately the good thing for taxpayers is usually not that well thought out. I mean, it's it's natural that if not, you have very, very good leadership. Government-run organizations tend to be very inefficient at best.
Well, the thing is that it's very these systems are very complex.
Yeah. Because
there's so many variables, there's so many dependencies that basically first you need to understand. I'm not even touching on human nature and how psychology works, but just technicalities of how systems are built and how they run. That I sometimes understand. As I said, I'm not a fighting, I'm not a battling activist. I tend to understand people, and in the end, I understand that also the decision makers take responsibility for their decisions. Yeah. So sometimes it's a matter for them of admitting that somebody below them in the structure knows better, and that's a problem for some people. And so I've spent many years perfecting my diplomatic skills, and it works. And I will be honest about that. And diplomacy took me in places where I'm somehow in a position to have a say, or at least at some time. From time to time, somebody will say, okay, let's call Szymon in Olsztyn and ask his opinion. And I say, this shouldn't be like that. If you want my opinion, this is my opinion. And these are my arguments. And they know that I will speak calmly, and I will I will try to do a decent job, and this is how I also learned.
You do the opposite of what I do.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I just realized why you're laughing.
I just write on the media page like the government are fucking idiots.
Well,
yeah, and nobody. I don't know why, but nobody from government calls me and asks of my opinion.
From government, they don't call me as well. But let's say
from senior management anywhere, don't call me like, hey Lars, what do you think we should do about this? Go like, yeah, that never happened.
Yeah. Well,
but
it is also one of the aspects of the difference of the systems that we are in.
And you say, when you're in a state-driven system, you have to work with the system. You can't work against it because it will swallow you up and spit you out.
Oh yeah, big time.
The thing is, I can do more good from the outside the system. Like as an influencer in Swedish firefighting, I do way more just teaching and inspiring and planting seeds in different minds. So it eventually turns into a river of pebbles, and then the authorities change, and they don't know.
Believe it or not, it's exactly the same with me. I mean, I've been doing so much work outside of the fire service, and it's bearing fruit. I mean, the system that I'm working in has the advantages, but also introduction of something takes so much effort. And sometimes when the decisions or solutions are not optimal, they're also binding for everyone. So it's also if you do something good, it's good for everyone. If we spoil something, everything is spoiled for everyone. So this part is spoiled for everyone. So, but also the power of social media is really unbelievable. We did so many good things through social media, like the hygiene, the issue, the cancer prevention. Most of that through social media, and it is my impression, mainly because of that, we got interest from the state side, and now the state side is doing their job is to slowly some changes and maybe allot some funds for solutions and so on. I will say that my mission is my life. What I'm doing professionally and also outside of the fire service, being a voluntary firefighter, being an activist, being the founder of cfbt.pl, running number of different things. Maybe you've seen the video, the rap video that we did based on Close Before You Doze. I mean, it was funny. We were looking for an artist and we didn't find any. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And it turns out that perhaps I have a talent. So there's hope for me also when I leave the fire service.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, but you're absolutely right that it's, it might be sometimes that if you want to change something or you have an idea and your job and you can't really let it go, you might be lucky sometimes and so on, but for most of it, it takes years of persistent work. Not necessarily work when you know where you're actually know where you're going, but roughly the idea. You're working towards something like I have something to say and I will say it 1,000 times in slightly different ways, in different places, and eventually it might catch on. And it's rewarding, but it's also not, because it's very rare that you get recognition from those types of things. But in the end, when you do those kind of things enough, then you also get personal recognition, which is very important. Everybody needs, like you said, everybody needs personal recognition. Like, if nobody liked what you do, if nobody likes what you're doing, and you still enjoy that, you're a psychopath. Like that's not being human.
Or you're escaping some other.
No, yeah, maybe you do it.
Into,
there's a massive problem. I mean, most people do things because it's part of fitting into the group, which is being liked of other people. Like it's
Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Yes. So recognition for deeds is important for anyone, and it's no difference to me or you or anyone's trying to change, or for that matter, the people that don't want to change. It's the same thing. So, but I sometimes I'm very bad. I'm not a good mentor. Like if like the different things I'm good at, like mentoring is not one, because I tend to be I don't have the patience to mentor someone. So if someone calls me like, okay, hey Lars, and roughly, I want to do what you do. Like I want to be better. I want to, instruct. I want to learn more. Go like, I don't like give them like here's what you're gonna do, like and like in some form of approachable manner. I just go like, okay, are you ready for 5 years of unpaid 200% work and with little or no gratification from anyone? Most likely you will burn a couple of bridges, you will piss people off, you will have uncomfortable discussions at work.
Jealousy, envy.
Jealousy, envy. Are you okay with that before you end up in a position where you might do some good?
That's actually some fantastic mentoring.
Well, I think it is. Like, do you really understand what it takes to do something that is actually noticed by a lot of people? If I not necessarily do it because I get noticed by a lot of people, but if I want to change something, I have to be noticed by a lot of people. Like it's not possible. So you have it, and when I try to answer those questions, it is you kind of see the glimmer of hope die in their eyes, and I go like, yeah, I shouldn't mentor people because you should be there should be a streamer of honesty about what it's going to take, but it should also be, okay, this is going to be hard work, but I'll help you through it. It's going to be okay. Like if I can do it, you can do it. If you want to go anywhere, so it is I mean, nobody I've talked to that has this passion for changing things or to the point where they're internationally out there trying to do good and so on. Nobody had an easy ride.
No, yeah, to be honest, another moment of personal confession.
Yeah.
Well, I went through a lot of difficult times in my life, like personally, in the emotional realm and so on. And a lot of that was also struggling with the changes that I cannot make,
absolutely,
for me, are so obviously needed, but I cannot, make them happen. And there's so much, what's the word? Disappointment and sometimes anger and all other different emotions. And I will admit that recently I took an approach that, okay, I cannot change the world for the better, me, myself alone, the entire world at once. So I'm going to do things well around myself. I'm going to do well the things that I can influence. Yeah. And funny enough, that was more or less the moment when the global picture, I mean, my national picture, started improving, Yeah. So also probably realizing that we only have limited, possibility to influence the reality around us is a healing moment in a way. It's like it's a good realization that, okay, but then you take on some other people who are your allies and understand you, and then you work with other guys, and okay, it's starting to work, and I've had many successes in my professional work, to the point where one day I said, okay, what happens if I have a big, failure? or I'm so much disappointed by something, will that destroy my mental attitude? And I started sort of conditioning myself to be ready for that moment. And this moment came. And some people could probably say, well, you attracted this moment and so on. But I prefer to think I was rather being realistic. It's nice to have successes, but there will be a time when something will not work. There was a time like that in recent history, let's say, of the Polish State Fire Service, where it was so difficult to introduce anything, to even get to the position where you could discuss some things with some people. And well, I was ready for that, so it didn't really destroy a lot of my initiative or my internal conviction to keep on going. But let's say probably I've matured. I have my years already. Still feel good and young and eager and so on. But also, let's say this is probably also experience. Well, you can only do what you can do in the position that you are. If you're the national fire chief, well, you still have the minister above you. Yeah. So everybody has a boss. I mean,
there's always politicians. Everybody hates you. So it's
and then nothing makes sense because it's rarely on the merit. It's more on connections or which option you consider to be the right one and so on. This is where professional firefighting ends and professional politics starts. And these, in my opinion, should never mix because
they have to.
Rescue should be always, provided.
Yeah, well, that's not how the world works. But I mean,
no, it's not.
One of the reasons, I mean, it's never one reason, but one of the reasons I quit being the professional firefighter was that I could not let go of my sense of failure. So I tried to do what I perceived good things, with the limitations and everything you have in terms of what you are supposed to do and what you can do and so on. And I try to look. I really try to look at it as you can only influence what you can influence. You can, like, if you do a good job and someone else doesn't like it, or if you do a good job, at least you perceive to do a good job, and someone else does a crappy job and doesn't recognize it and so on. I mean, intellectually, I know that that's not up to me. I mean, I can't control that. I can't control what budgets fire chiefs have and so on. But I couldn't. I took everything personal. I knew it wasn't personal. It's not that they did it towards me personally. But I took I couldn't go home and say, "Hey, I'm very happy with my work," but it turns out my half year I was spending here, it was useless because like for many reasons, like that sucked the living energy out of me in saying that. So I could not. I wasn't feeling good when I had too many failures. I was sort of either I continue and I get bitter, or I quit and I keep on doing things I like in that different context, which is
You're mentioning something that I find also very, very important. Working on morale, working on motivation for fire services. I was always interested in psychology of motivation, in all that kind of thing, where I understood that parallel. It's funny because when I go back and remind myself every training program that I have seen in the fire service, they always covered 3 areas. They said, as a graduate of this course, the firefighter should know, so that's knowledge, be able to do, skills, and present attitudes. So that was the motivational field. So interesting that it was always noticed as something important in training, that you don't only train people to know and to do, but also to not to think in a certain way, because that's maybe too strong, but to show them that there's certain attitude behind being a firefighter. Like, okay, well, if you enter this profession, you understand that you will get into risky situations, and your mission will be to save people's lives. And you should do this as best as you can, sincerely, with yourself, because there will be many situations where you will have no one standing above you and assessing whether or not you're doing optimal things. This is something between you and only and yourself and your inside. So that always was a very important part for me, and I even started let's say motivational project was largely inspired by a project called Fully Involved.
Yeah, Mark Van Oppen.
Yeah, and this is something that I do. It's called Projekt LIDER. I realized this is an important part of what we're doing, and I presented it in 2015 on one of the conferences. Again, I will show a logo. This is like that.
Yeah.
It says train, learn, train, be an example. And was also, I like listen to Mark Van Appen, because he says, okay, you can get engaged, you can get motivated and so on, but what will wear you out is when you expect other people to share your attitude.
Yeah.
Just keep on doing your thing, and then it will get you in some place, and you'll be able to assess whether or not you've used your energy and your life in the proper manner. But don't look into other people. And I also had a problem with that for a long time. It's human nature. It's a matter of upbringing and many other aspects, like some of the experiences and so on. I think I can say today that I've sort of cured myself out of that, and I'm satisfied with my work. I know that I've achieved a lot, and I don't boast. I don't, get false pride in that. I just value myself, and this actually allows me to learn even more and have interaction with people and take from them. But at the same time, I know that what I'm doing is valuable, and I don't always need patting on the shoulder by everyone. I mean, okay, there will be people who don't like this. I'm willing to engage in a conversation with them, provided that they can have a civil conversation. If they cannot, well, I can't be bothered. I mean, I have better things to do than investing my, energy and emotions in a conversation that starts with "you moron" or whatever. This is stupid or so on.
I the thing I'm interrupting is because I really should
Sure.
break up soon. But I want to take that on a final question on that. So, when you look at people that have gone through a lot of trying to change things, and they've been successful and sometimes not, and so on, they tend to wear out. Like it seems to be the norm, and they kind of get set back, and they either become bitter or they become hard to deal with. Now I'll try to explain that. So my experience is that people tend to become the thing they the thing they hate when they started. So when you start off, you maybe want to change something, and you go to your superior or something, which may be you in 20 years, and you go there and say, "Hey, I have an idea," and you're full of enthusiasm, passion, and the guy and the girl sitting on the other side looks at it and go like, "Yeah, that's not gonna work." Like, because they maybe tried it multiple times. They know it's not gonna work. Or maybe they just presume it's not going to work, or they see a multitude of problems with this. They go like, I have no idea how it's going to get budget for that, or how we're going to do this and this and this. They see all the obstacles because they've been in that environment for a long time. And the guy or girl sitting there with their, big eyes, so I need to do this. I've seen this cool thing. It's a new tool. We need to buy this. And the easiest thing to do is to become that person and be the one with good intention saying that don't run on this ball. You're gonna get crushed. Like I've tried it before. You're gonna get money. And I looked at myself and I found myself in a position where I sometimes, to instructors or people that came to me and said, hey, I need this and this and this, I found myself shooting them down before I even recognized that was what I was doing. Like I just started to become. I saw signs of becoming the old guy who's just says no to everything because the old guy thinks he knows the best.
Like those two old guys in the Muppet Show on the balcony.
Probably like that. Like,
look, I mean, Lars,
But the question I have to you is like how, because it's very hard to know if you're becoming that one, because you always perceive yourself as being the one who's like I've been doing this for 15 years. I have fairly good understanding how things work, and that seems impossible. So don't go there.
Well, as a rule, in our minds, we are perfect in front of ourselves.
Yes.
As a rule, that's human nature. I mean, look,
I'm objectively perfect, so that's different. But yes, I understand that other people are subjectively perfect.
Or they may have this false impression or whatever. Well, honestly, you're touching on a very interesting subject. I've given a lot of thought to that. Honestly, for the main reason is I've been struggling with a lot in my life for many years because of difficult childhood. I had some difficult childhood, and it shaped me. And only as a 40-year-old man who I am right now, I understand more about life. But also because of the difficulties that I went through connected to some of the background, some of the private life, some of the professional life, and so on. And I went through difficult times, really difficult, because they always accompany any success. That there's always the price that you're paying. But I will say that I went through a long period of therapy, psychotherapy, that I went to willingly to understand, because it's just something that I'm interested about. I was very skeptical about this for a long time, thinking about myself that I know, a lot about psychology, about myself, and I'm really a strong person and so on. Then life proved me sort of a bit wrong. I mean, life put me in situations where I really never thought I could be, and I had to take some decisions and decide who I am and what I will do about those situations without any prior experience on that. So it was really like a personality test, and I really see a very strong connection with the Maslow pyramid of needs that we mentioned before. I spoke about it in IFIW 2018. Yeah. There's so much personal experience as background to who we are and what we do and how we interact with people, that on one hand it's so difficult to give any advice and say anything wise or smart about this, but on the other hand it tends to prove the fact that the more there is willingness in us to engage in constructive, polite conversations instead of proving and points and so on, and really understanding how our needs dictate what we do. It takes a lot of knowledge about ourselves. I didn't know the things about myself before I went to psychotherapy. It was really useful in helping me understand how I work and what are my motivators. I'll give you one let's say example. After 40 years of life and 20 years of successful work as a firefighter with achievements, I understood and accepted, and I'm really feeling well with the fact that I don't need my work to be happy, which I thought the opposite. I don't need it. I mean, maybe I'm also in a position that I can, already retire with not great, but not very poor pension. I can, do other things. And if I'm supposed to do gardening or, create rap music, I'm also fine with that. I mean, I was too much attracted to what people think about me, attached, sorry, was the word, to what people think about me and what do they think about my work, that I lost the ability to value my work and my achievements, which are objective and written already in the annals of history, in a way, because I have my own achievements over here, but I needed new achievements to keep on the feeling of what you say, appreciation,
self-value.
No, somebody else valuing me.
Yeah, but you value yourself through others, that you feel that if other people say I'm good, I feel a sense of value.
Yes. Now I know this about myself. Now I don't need to convince anyone and so on. And in a strange way, it's probably something that can be felt in the interaction with me, because people say so, that when they interact with me, they have a feeling that there will be a conversation, and even if I may, not agree to help them or not agree with what they're saying, I will do it in a way that will be acceptable for them. Now, Maslow stated that you need to breathe, I'm sorry for pardon my French. You need to shit, you need to pee, and so on. Reproduce. But then the very low on the pyramid, which means it's very strong, it's very fundamental, is the need to be to belong, to be a member of some group. In a way, you're a member of some group when you get along with some people. Like you don't have to have a sticker like I'm a firefighter, I'm a shift firefighter, or I'm like Olsztyn firefighter or whatever. Like I'm just in a group of people who get along. It's already so. This is the acceptance. Like people need that a lot. I mean, if I want to lead by example, I'm in the position of already as what is called a senior officer. I'm a deputy head of training center. I'm coordinating the program of instructor training for Poland and so on. So I also understand my position, and I'm willing to admit in front of people, hey, look, I don't know this, to not create a false feeling of superiority or something. I'm just a regular guy like they are. Maybe I'm just one lap ahead of them in terms of how many books I read or how many trainings I went to or how many people I've spoken with and they shared something valuable with me. I'm passing that on, and I'm expecting that their path will be easier and they'll catch up faster. Maybe they'll overgrow me. That's also fine. But always when I approached even the hardest looking old school firefighters, I also immediately worked with my psychology trick and said, what do you think about that? Tell me something from your experience. When you do that in front of a group, now this person is becoming the mentor, even though you just created this situation by asking the person this question, and the person can share, yes, this also agrees with my experience. And we went to this house fire once, and okay, the person tells a story. I'm not saying it's fake or artificial, but you can actually hear some very good stuff about this. But a lot of that is just interpersonal skills, I would say, because there's so much need for this in today's world. And I had this discussion with the guy the other day, and I'm saying, okay, this forest ban that it was introduced right now, it's not lawful. There's no law for that. They cannot do this, and it's stupid. And he's saying, like, you're the officer, you should give the example because everybody will want to go to the forest. I mean, maybe that's your problem in Warsaw. Over here, I live on the outskirts of the city, and when I go out the gate and I turn left, I'm in the forest. Why should I be banned? There's no people there. I mean, I'm talking about the coronavirus, yeah? And the restrictions. And he's saying, oh, people's egoistic needs will destroy this world. I'm sorry, are you referring to me with your comment? Oh, yes, because blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, look, basically we just finished our conversation because I could insult you as a revenge, but I don't need to do this. I will just ignore you. And then when you're ready, we can continue the discussion. Give me your arguments. But apart from that, I'm not going to engage. There's internet especially creates this sick or ill way of interaction because there's no intention, there's no voice intonation, there's no
it's
gesture,
horrible.
there's no mimic and so on.
No, it's horrible.
But this also is my impression that this living in this reality also translate into how people live their lives in general and how they fulfill their needs. Like, okay, somebody, gave me a hard time in Facebook comments. Now I'm gonna, be mean to people.
Well,
that
I think it's the other way around. That's always. No, I'm just gonna wrap up. That's always been. I had this conversation with John McDonough just recently. I think it's just. I think it's just the other way around. Social media just amplifies human nature as it is.
It does, yes, it does.
It's not
as it is. Yes, I will agree.
It's not as social media doing anything. So it's the willingness to shoot someone down rapidly is human nature, because we don't want to admit someone is wrong. We don't like that person, whatever it might be. To shoot someone down as quickly as possible is the most efficient way of defending yourself from having to be wrong or something. And the more
whole concept of comfort zone and improvement.
And also looks like the thing with distance, like if you're standing on a soccer game, you hear this. Just people just do awful things and shout awful things because they're not talking to a human being, right? They're talking to basically an entity. It's a supporter from the other team. They're not humans, so they're just a football player. They're just a referee. They're not humans. They're not individuals. They're a thing. So I mean, there's no difference towards people, insulting each other online or that, and it's just amplified by the horrible means of communication, which is today's social media, Twitter or Facebook. That's a good point. I try to write posts. Now we'll wrap this up now, but I'll try to write points on Facebook, like I want to share some thoughts or a video or a clip or something I find interesting, and invariably either I spend a shitload of time writing the ins and out of this problem, like all the things you have to write about this problem or thing and everything around it, and you put it out and 5 people read it, and you kind of go, I just spent and you spent the whole evening writing that. Or you put out a cool video and you just write something in just loosely. This is something I shot at a video. Looked cool. Look how flames are behaving when I shoot water on it. And then all of a sudden 200 people have comments about, why didn't you say this? This could be interpreted like you say this. This is all wrong. Why you did this and this and this? Because they put in everything I didn't write.
Mm-hmm.
So they put it there. They put it in a completely different context. They say, "Oh, you're trying to prove this. How was this experiment set up?" I go like, "Dude, it was just a flame on the ceiling, and it was." So you have this community in a classroom. I would have presented with context, and there would be a discussion, and we'll talk about it, and so on. And online, that's not even possible, because even if people start writing questions, it takes like forever to write an answer, and that gets misinterpreted, or that has missing information. So someone assumes something, and then you have to respond to that, and it's a never-ending.
It's a waste of time.
It's a just never-ending spiral to the bottom.
And energy. You know.
Yeah.
And to do what? Like to prove a point. I mean, people they don't have the tendency. They have the perfect ability to discuss something that was not the topic of the.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
Or
exactly.
of the conversation. Yeah.
No, and so I have a rule now. I never. I say I don't follow it, but I generally never ever comment on anything besides my own posts. And if I comment on my own post, I try to snip it off as fast as possible. Like I get, like if someone says, hey Lars, I'm very glad you did this. I'll, thank you. And if someone has a short question, I'll try to answer that. I feel obligated to answer. But if it's the beginning of a debate or any kind, I'll just no. I'm not going there. I will not. I refuse to go there.
Yeah, I've seen some never-ending debates.
Yeah, and I mean, I burnt myself before, and I'm not getting in it. So it's very hard sometimes, because and I get it, because sometimes I read something. It might something. Let's say I post something on Facebook, and it's on a someone shares it in a different group, and they have a discussion about it, and maybe they're totally misrepresenting something I've said, misinterpreted. Maybe, I was unclear and so on. Every fiber in my body want to go in there and defend myself, like, and correct the things. But I just go like, swallow hard, back off, shut the computer down, and forget about it. Like, you can't control it. And sometimes when I have videos that share 200 times. It's not even possible to even go through what everyone is writing. So you have this. You just have to accept that online you either engage and you fail, or you don't engage and you fail.
Yeah. Well, that's the cost of being online.
You just let whatever. You let whatever misinformation, misinterpretation, misrepresentations that might happen, you just let them go unattended, and you just go like, fuck it, I'm just gonna. The alternative to not do anything is worse. That's just what I'm thinking. Like I do,
exactly.
Like I do a post and I write something interesting or something, and I say, I think this post is more for good than for bad. I will not fix all the bad it creates. This is sort of my like realistic outcome of that. But I will try probably. I have a strong. I might stop social media altogether, even though it's a fantastic channel. I've considered in periods.
Me too.
I've strong, and I've started a blog that's not public. Like, I'm just writing to just see, like, instead just put a blog without the possibility to comment or like.
Yeah.
It's just my page. Look, hey, I want to say this. Whoever shares it, wherever they share it, I will not know about it. Thank you. If
Yeah.
nobody reads it or 1,000 people read it, I don't know. I in that case, I'm not writing to get likes. I'm writing because I have something to say.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's one of very good human needs, actually.
Yeah. And
the expression and it's actually top of the needs, enriching other people. If you have something to offer and you're offering it, that gives you a lot of satisfaction yourself. Yeah. So that's
it was great chatting with you, Szymon.
The pleasure was mine.